convert fractions to decimals. The fraction bar represents division. And then to convert a fraction to a decimal, we divide. And we do this by dividing the numerator by the denominator. Now, if a decimal repeats, we will use a bar that goes over the numbers, and when the decimal repeats, these are called periodic. So if like the problem became 72, 72, 72, we can go ahead and just write it as 72 with a bar on the top of it, of the 72, because it shows that it's going to repeat the 7 and 2 infinitely. Now, let's look at example 1. There are two motors rated at 1/8 horsepower and 1/3 horsepower. What is the decibel equivalent for each motor? So what we need to do is take our numerator and divide it by our denominator. So we put the 8 on the front and the 1 in the middle. So what we do is we put 1 inside, 8 on the outside, and we can tell that we're going to need to add some zeros. Now, 8 can't go into 1, but it can go into 10 one time. 8 times 1 is 8. We subtract. 10 minus 8 is 2. We go ahead and bring down the 0, so now we have 20. 8 can go into 20 2 times. 8 times 2 is 16. We subtract, and we're left with 4. Because this becomes a 1, this becomes 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. And 1 minus 1 is 0. Our next thing will be is to move down that 0. So now we have 8 can go into 40 how many times? Which it can go into 5 times, because 8 times 5 is 40. We go ahead and subtract, and we get 0. Now we need to go ahead and bring that decimal up. So the decimal equivalent for 1/8 is 0.125. So now we can go 3 can go into 1 how many times? Let's add zeros. 3 can go into 1, but it can go into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. We go ahead and subtract. 10 minus 9 is 1. Next, we're going to bring down the 0 to make it a 10. 3 can go into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. So we subtract. 10 minus 9 is 1. Go ahead and bring down the next 0. 3 can go into 10 3 times. Now 3 times 3 is 9. We go ahead and subtract, and we're left with 1. Now we can just add another 0, and this can continue on. As you can see, we're always going to have a 3 on the top, and it's just going to continue to repeat forever. So what we're going to do instead is just write the equivalent for this. So for 1/3, the equivalent is 0.33, and we just put a fraction bar over the 33 because it's just going to repeat. Now our decimal equivalent for 1/8 is 0.125. So these are our decimal equivalents for these problems. Now let's do another example. Example 2. A diode in a circuit has a current of 0.375 amps. What is this expressed as a fraction? Well, we have our fraction 375. So this 3 is our 10th spot. So this really is 1 over 10 in this spot in terms of tens. This is our hundredths. So this is 1 and 100ths kind of spot. And then this is our 1000s. So what we do when we have this is we really multiply 3 times this 1/10. So then we get 3 over 10 plus, and we're just going to add these up. 7 times 1 over 100, so 7 times 1 is 7. We're left with over 100. And then we have 5 times 1 over 1,000. So we just have 5 over 1,000. Now, we can go ahead and find our common denominator. Now, our common denominator will just be 1,000. So in order to get to 1,000 for all of them, for 10, we're going to need to multiply it by, each time you move up, it's just a multiple of 10. So we're going to need to multiply it by 100. This is because to get from 10 to 100, you just multiply by 10. To then get to 100 to 1,000, you multiply by 10. So we just multiply it by 100. And then 7 over 100, we need to multiply this by 10 over 10. Now, let's go ahead and multiply this out. 3 times 100 is 300 over 1,000. Next, we have 7 times 10, which is 70 over 1,000, plus 5 over 1,000. So this becomes, as we add them all up, we have 300 plus 70, so that's 370 plus 5, so 375 over 1,000. Now, what we would need to do next would be to divide by 5 on the top and the bottom, so we can reduce it to its lowest terms. So 375 divided by 5, 5 goes into 37 7 times, so we get 35. We go ahead and subtract. 7 minus 5 is 2, 3 minus 3 is 0. Now we have 2, now we have 25 as we bring down the 5. 5 can go to 25 5 times. So on the top we have 75. Now 1,000 divided by 5. 5 can go into not 1 but 10 2 times. So 5 times 2 is 10. Subtract, we get 0. Then we just bring down a 0. It can't go into 0, so 5 can go into 0 0 times. We can go ahead and subtract, we get 0. Because 5 times 0 is 0. We subtract, we get 0. Now we bring down that last 0. 5 can go into 0, so it's just 0. We subtract, we get 0. Because 5 times 0 is 0. So here we have 200. Now we can see that 75 and 200 can be divided again by 5. So if we go ahead and divide by 5 over 5, so 75 divided by 5, five can go into 7 one time. 5 times 1 is 5. Subtract, we get 2. Bring down the 5. 5 can go to 25 5 times. So this is 15 now on the top. So 75 divided by 5 is 15. Now 200 divided by 5. 5 can go into 20 4 times. We subtract 20 minus 20. We get 0. Bring down the 0. So 5 can go to 0 0 times. 5 times 0 is 0. We subtract. We get 0. So we're left with 15 over 40. But we can divide one last time. So 5 over 5. So 15 divided by 5 on the top. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 40 divided by 5 is 8. So our fraction that's equivalent to our decimal is 3/8. Now let's do one final example. Example 3. A coil in a circuit has a current of 0.75 amps. What is this expressed as a fraction? So we have 0.75. Once again, this is our 10th spot, and this is our 100th spot. So all we need to do then is multiply the 7 times this 10th. So when we do that, 7 times 1/10, it's just 7 over 10. Plus, now this 5 times 100ths. So then we get 5 over 100. So we can see that our common denominator for these two will be 100. So in order to get to 100, the first number needs to be multiplied by 10 over 10. So now we can go ahead and multiply this out. 7 times 10 is 70. 10 times 10 is 100. Plus 5 over 100. So we're left with 75 over 100. Now we need to go ahead and divide. So we can see that the 75 and 100 are both divisible by 5. So 75 divided by 5. 5 can go into 7 one time. Then 5 times 1 is 5. We go ahead and subtract, and we get 2. Now we're going to go ahead and bring down that 5. So 5 can go into 25 5 times. So we go ahead and subtract, because 5 times 5 is 25. We get 0. So on the top, we're left with 15. Then 100 divided by 5 is 5 can go into 10 2 times. 5 times 2 is 10. Go ahead and subtract. 10 minus 10 is 0. Bring down the 0. 5 can go to 0 0 times. So we subtract, we get 0. So this is 15 over 20. Now this can be further reduced by 5. So 15 divided by 5 on the top and the bottom to take out a factor of it. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 20 divided by 5 is 4. So our decimal expressed as a fraction is 3/4.